The truck came on a Tuesday morning in October 2009, backing down the gravel lane toward Loretta Haynes's barn like it had somewhere better to be. Two men climbed out. Without a word, they dropped the tailgate and started unloading bale after bale of tangled, compressed fabric. Offcuts, end rolls, edge trimmings. Canvas the color of clay. Denim scraps bound with wire. Rough cotton remnants that smelled faintly of machine oil. Loretta stood at the barn door, arms folded across her chest, watching. Her neighbor, Darnell Pruitt, leaned on the fence post beside her. "That's trash," he said. She didn't answer right away. She walked to the nearest bale, pulled back a corner of fabric, rubbed it between her fingers, felt the weight of it, the weave, the density. "Maybe," she said finally. Those deliveries would keep coming for 11 years, and by the time the last truck made its final run, what had arrived as waste would be worth $650,000. But first, why was a cotton mill delivering its waste to a dairy farmer's barn in central Tennessee? And what exactly did Loretta Haynes see in those scraps that nobody else could? If stories about ordinary people building something lasting from almost nothing inspire you, subscribe and join this community. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. These farm stories travel further than you'd think. Now let's go back to the beginning, because to understand what Loretta built, you have to understand where she came from. Loretta Haynes grew up 11 miles outside of Cookeville, Tennessee, on a mixed farm that her grandfather had worked and her father had inherited. They kept dairy cattle, grew soybeans on the low acres, and raised a kitchen garden that was nobody's hobby. It fed the family through winter. She was the middle child of 5. Her mother sewed. Not as a craft, as a necessity. Loretta watched her mother cut pattern pieces from flour sacks, newspaper, curtain remnants, whatever was available, before she ever saw a bolt of proper dress fabric. By the time Loretta was 10, she understood something her mother never said aloud. You used what was there, or you went without. She wasn't a prodigy. She wasn't exceptional in school. What teachers remembered about her was that she asked too many questions, not the kind designed to impress, but the kind born from genuine confusion about why things worked the way they did. Why does canvas hold a stitch better than linen? Why does a seam placed on the bias stretch when a straight seam doesn't? She studied agricultural business for 2 years at Tennessee Tech before returning home when her father's health declined. There was no dramatic sacrifice in her mind. The farm needed running. She ran it. By her mid-30s, Loretta was managing 42 head of dairy cattle, maintaining equipment, keeping books, and raising 2 children with her husband Clem. She was not a woman who wasted time, wasted materials, or wasted opportunities to learn something useful. Which brings us to Garfield Textile. Garfield Textile had operated a mid-sized cotton processing and weaving facility in White County, Tennessee, since 1974. At its peak, it employed around 280 people, producing industrial-grade canvas, cotton duck, and heavyweight denim fabric, the kind used in work uniforms, tarps, aprons, and agricultural covers. Here is something most people don't know about textile manufacturing. When a mill cuts fabric to order, it generates waste at every step. Roll ends, the last few yards on a bolt that don't meet minimum length requirements for sale. Edge trimmings, the selvage stripped from fabric before cutting. Offcuts from pattern efficiency losses, which in industrial cutting can run anywhere from 8 to 18% of total fabric by weight. That waste had to go somewhere. Landfill fees were rising. The mill's dumpsters filled twice a week. When a management decision in 2009 led them to seek alternative disposal, someone made a phone call to a local farmer willing to take the bales in exchange for reduced hauling costs. That farmer was Loretta Haynes. The arrangement was simple. Garfield Textile would deliver fabric waste to her barn. She'd deal with it as she saw fit, composting, covering hay bales, whatever. The mill saved roughly $180 per month in disposal fees. Loretta received the scraps at no charge. Nobody considered it a business arrangement. It was a convenience, a handshake deal. The first delivery contained approximately 800 pounds of mixed fabric. Loretta spent 3 days after that first truck visit doing nothing but sorting. She pulled on her barn gloves and went through every bale by hand, separating by fiber type, by weight, by condition. She found canvas so tightly woven she couldn't push a thumbnail through it. She found denim that had been pre-shrunk and finished to a near military standard. She found cotton duck, an old term for a particular plain weave fabric that measured 14 ounces per square yard, heavy enough to build a work boot from. Her neighbor Darnell stopped by again and shook his head. "Loretta, why are you cataloging garbage?" "Because," she said, not looking up, "I don't know yet what it is." That distinction matters. Most people look at unfamiliar materials and categorize them immediately. Loretta refused to do that until she understood them. She wrote down measurements. She pulled threads and counted the weave count. She soaked sample pieces in water, dried them, and measured the shrinkage. She folded corners to test whether the fabric held a crease or relaxed back. She was essentially performing the same process a textile grader does, assessing quality, durability, and appropriate end use, but she had no formal training. She was working from curiosity alone. By the end of that third day, she had separated the 800 pounds into 4 distinct piles, and she had one question she couldn't answer yet. Why were these fabrics being thrown away instead of sold? It took several more deliveries and a conversation with a Garfield floor supervisor named Marcus Teal to understand the economics. Roll ends under 15 yards couldn't be sold at standard wholesale prices. Buyers required consistent yardage minimums. Irregular offcuts had no graded value on the commercial market. The mill wasn't discarding inferior fabric, it was discarding inconvenient fabric. That was the pivot point. Loretta had been sewing her entire life. She had a commercial-grade Juki machine her mother had left her, purchased second-hand in 1987. That winter, she started making bags. Not elegant bags, not fashion bags, work bags. Specifically, large-format canvas tote bags designed for farm and contractor use, the kind meant to carry tools, seed packets, produce, or equipment across a work site. She used the heavy canvas for the body, denim for reinforcing the base, and cut handles from doubled-over duck cloth that she stitched 3 times on each seam. The first prototype took her 4 hours. The second took 2.5. By the 5th, she had refined the pattern enough that she could cut and sew 1 complete bag in under 90 minutes. She gave 3 bags to Clem. He started using one immediately. By the end of the first week, 2 of his farming friends had asked where they could get one. She charged them $22 each. They didn't flinch. She had spent exactly $0 on materials. In 2010, Loretta Haynes was not building a company. She was solving a problem she found interesting, using materials that cost her nothing, in a barn where the cattle still needed feeding, every morning at 5:30. She made 47 bags that first year, sold 39 of them locally. Farmers, contractors, a feed store owner who took 6 on consignment. The other 8 she gave to family. She kept every dollar separately, in a tin on the shelf above her sewing table. At year's end, it held $863. She bought better thread and a second sewing machine with it. In 2011, Garfield Textile increased their deliveries. Twice monthly now, sometimes more. The bales kept coming. The variety expanded. Heavier cotton duck, some waxed canvas remnants, industrial webbing offcuts she hadn't seen before. Loretta's sorting system grew more sophisticated. She began tagging bales by tensile quality, a term she'd learned from a library book on textile manufacturing she'd requested through interlibrary loan. She made 140 bags in 2011, sold all of them. A hardware store in Cookville agreed to carry 6 on consignment. They sold out in 3 weeks. The owner called and asked for 12 more. That call changed something in Loretta's thinking. This is where most small craftspeople make the same mistake. They price based on what they think a buyer will accept, not based on what the product is worth. Loretta avoided that trap almost by accident. She was calculating her time honestly, 90 minutes per bag, her own labor, and adding what she called a quality premium because the materials, though technically waste, were outperforming anything she could buy at retail. The canvas she was using was industrial grade. A 14-ounce duck cloth bag, properly sewn, would outlast a 6-ounce cotton canvas tote by a decade. She raised her retail price to $38, then $45. Then, in 2013, to $58 for her standard large tote. Nobody stopped buying. In fact, the opposite happened. When she raised the price, she started getting a different kind of customer. One who asked about materials, who asked how long it would last, who came back and told friends. She learned something that business schools teach in theory. Premium pricing attracts customers who value quality, and customers who value quality generate less return work and more repeat business. 2014 brought trouble, not disaster, but the kind of slow friction that tests whether someone is serious. A regional outdoor retailer in Nashville had expressed interest in carrying her bags wholesale. Loretta drove up in the pickup with 12 samples. The buyer spent about 4 minutes with them. "They're not consistent enough," the buyer said. "The stitching pattern varies. The handles aren't uniform. We'd need standardized production." He wasn't wrong. Loretta drove home and didn't speak much at dinner. Clem asked what was wrong. She told him what the buyer said. "Is he right?" Clem asked. "Yes," she said. She spent 3 months building what she called a pattern board, a system of templates, cut guides, and assembly sequences that reduced variation in every bag she made. She taught her daughter Maeve, 18 at the time, to cut and prepare pieces using the board. She went back to the Nashville retailer in early 2015 with 20 new bags. He placed an order for 40. That was the first wholesale account. It generated $1,040 in one transaction. She kept the invoice. Framed it eventually. By 2017, Haynes Canvas Goods, the name she'd registered quietly in 2013, had secured accounts with 7 retailers across Tennessee and southern Kentucky. She had one part-time employee, her neighbor's daughter Precious Whitfield, who had learned to sew and became Loretta's most reliable cutter. And then, something unexpected happened. A contractor in Murfreesboro bought one of her large tote bags from a hardware store. He posted a photograph on a Facebook group for tradespeople with the caption, "Best work bag I've ever owned, made by a woman in Cookeville from cotton mill scraps." Thing is bulletproof. It was shared 2,400 times in 5 days. Loretta's phone rang from numbers she didn't recognize. Orders came in through a website her son Garrett had built her the previous Christmas. She sold 220 bags in the following 6 weeks, more than she'd sold in all of 2015. She ran out of finished inventory in 11 days. Then she ran out of prepared fabric. Then she ran out of time. She called Precious. She called Maeve. She set up a second work area in the barn's back room. She worked 12-hour days for 4 weeks straight. She shipped every order, delayed some by 2 weeks. Wrote personal notes of apology with each delayed package. Nearly every delayed customer ordered again. The years between 2018 and 2020 were the years that would have broken a less methodical person. Demand had grown beyond what one barn and 2 part-time sewers could supply. Cash flow was irregular. She needed more fabric than Garfield Textiles' waste stream alone could provide, so she began purchasing roll-end lots directly from other mills at reduced cost, a system she understood better than most buyers because she'd spent a decade learning fabric from the inside out. She hired 2 more workers. She converted the barn's entire eastern bay into a proper production space, used flooring, proper lighting, 4 industrial machines arranged in a flow pattern she'd designed herself after sketching it on graph paper for a month. She turned down 3 separate offers from investors who wanted majority stakes. "I didn't build this to hand it to someone," she said. In 2020, Garfield Textile announced closure. The mill that had been delivering waste to her barn for 11 years, since that first October morning in 2009, shut its doors, another casualty of offshore competition and rising input costs. Loretta attended the final day, shook hands with Marcus Teal, who had retired by then but came to watch the lights go off. She thanked him for every delivery. "You know," he told her, "we thought we were doing you a favor." She smiled. "You were." By 2023, Haynes Canvas Goods was generating approximately $650,000 in annual revenue, not from a single breakthrough product, not from a viral moment or an investor's checkbook, from 14 years of incremental work, priced correctly, produced consistently, and sold to customers who came back. The company carried 12 bag styles, 4 core totes, 3 backpacks, a utility apron, 2 tool rolls, and a market bag that had become her most recognizable product. They employed 6 people, all from within 30 miles of the farm. They sourced from 3 different mills. They had wholesale accounts in 4 states. Loretta still fed the cattle in the morning, still sorted fabric on Tuesday afternoons, still sat at the original Juki machine when she wanted to think through a new design. The barn still smelled like machine oil and hay. There's a photograph on the wall of the production space. It shows the first truck, the 2 workers at the tailgate, the bales on the ground, Loretta in the frame, arms folded, watching. Darnell Pruitt passed away in 2021. He never quite believed what the pile became, though toward the end, he'd admitted, with a kind of stubborn affection, that she might have known something he didn't. She doesn't talk much about being proven right. She talks more about what she learned from the fabric itself. About how industrial canvas, made to last, made from fibers that had been cleaned and spun and woven to engineering specifications, had no business being in a landfill. About how the mill didn't discard those bales because they were inferior. It discarded them because the system had no use for them. She had use for them, and that is maybe the oldest lesson in farming. One the agrarian philosopher Masanobu Fukuoka understood when he wrote, "The ultimate goal of farming is not the growing of crops, but the cultivation and perfection of human beings." Loretta Haynes didn't grow crops in her barn. She grew a business, a skill, a livelihood, and a reputation, all from the material other people were paying to throw away. The first truck came in October 2009. She rubbed that canvas between her fingers and felt something nobody else felt. Not treasure, not destiny, just possibility. And in the end, that was enough.